Hello there, my name is Ismail. This is part 2 of our Blender Point 8 training series. And before we dive into Blender, let's first talk about what 3D is. So we live in a three-dimensional world, and let me first get my images here. We live in a three-dimensional world. You can walk forward, you can walk backwards, you can walk to the left, the right, you can jump up, you can also fall down. But before 3D applications were a thing, the only way to represent this visually was on a piece of paper, and a piece of paper is just one dimension. It's just two dimensions. So you can draw lines going up, you can draw lines going left or right or up and down, but you can't draw them going forward or backwards. You can manipulate that using 3D, using perspective, by drawing it on a piece of paper, or if you're using a computer, you can try using applications that like 2D applications like Photoshop, Paint, or any other two-dimension application. What you're basically doing is just faking 3D. You're not really working in a three-dimension world. So let's say you're trying to draw a cube. You start by drawing it in a two-dimension like this, but this is not representative of the kind of world we're living in, because our world is a three-dimensional world. So what we usually do is fake it by drawing, by using perspective. So you would maybe add a third face like that to show that it's a three-dimensional cube. But it doesn't really represent that exactly, because if, say, you wanted to look at the other side, you would have to draw that side again. So let's attempt that. So you again start with that two dimension and then fake the other side by using perspective. So you can see it will really be a lot of work to do that. When 3D applications came into life, they introduced the third dimension. So instead of just working in the X and Y plane, so you can see they're also represented here. This would be our Y, and this would be our X plane axes. So instead of just being limited to those two axes, 3D applications like Blender, 3D Max, Maya, Cinema 4D introduced the Z axis. So instead of just working in this plane, so if we try to do this cube in Blender, you can do it the conventional way of just faking it with perspective. Let's say, and faking it like that. This would be the same as drawing on a piece of paper, but if you tried to look at the other side and see, it would be a flat object instead of a cube, a three-dimensional object as you would expect it to be in our real world. So 3D applications like Blender, Cinema 4D, or Maya, whatever you might want to use, introduced the Z dimension, the depth dimension. So you can look in front, you can look forward, you can move forward, or you can move backwards, you can move up, you can move down. So we are no longer limited to the two dimensions we used to work in with 2D applications of just drawing on a piece of paper. So you can see we already have a cube here, and if I wanted to look at the back side, I would just rotate my 3D view and look at the back side. If I wanted to move forward, I just move forward. Let me go out of this. I just move forward, sideways, any direction that you want to move. So that's the beauty of 3D applications, is that they introduce a dimension that we have in the world, but that was really hard to represent on paper or using conventional 2D applications like Photoshop. So yeah, that's a basic rundown of what 3D applications are. They just add a third dimension to how we visualize our real world. This 2D application just gave us two axes, and we would fake the third axis by using perspective lines like this, which added more time to what we were creating. So if you wanted to make a picture, you would have to use a lot of perspective lines to make the same picture. That would be easily made in a 3D application. So you can see I don't really have to do a lot here. I'll just have, even if I started out with a plane that we started out with in Photoshop, let me clear this, that we started out in Photoshop, even if I started out with a plane, I'll just use 3D tools to extrude the third dimension, to extrude the plane into a cube, to have it look exactly as you expect it in a third dimension. To do this thing in a 2 dimension, you'd have to do a lot of mouse clicks to get that represented in a third dimension. And you can see there's a lot of distortion. If you don't really know a lot of perspective, how to draw perspective, you won't have a very accurate representation of what you're drawing. Yes, so that's a quick introduction of how of the difference between the 2D dimensions, 2 dimensions, and 3D dimension. Thank you.